What if you were a lion, but you couldn't roar? In the heart of the golden savanna lived a little lion named Leo. He had soft, golden fur, bright, curious eyes, and the biggest dreams of any cub in the pride. There was just one problem. Every lion in the savanna could let out a mighty roar that echoed across the grasslands. But whenever Leo tried to roar, squeak, a tiny little sound popped out instead. The other young lions could roar louder and louder every day, but Leo's roar never seemed to grow. Soon, Leo became afraid to even try. And then one stormy day, something happened that would change his life forever. A lost cub needed help. The animals of the savanna needed a hero. And Leo would have to discover whether the smallest lion could find the courage to make the biggest roar of all. Stay close, because this heartwarming adventure is about to begin. As the golden sun rose over the vast African savanna, its warm rays stretched across the tall grass, painting the land in shades of gold and orange. Birds chirped cheerful morning songs from the acacia trees. Zebras grazed peacefully in the distance. Elephants made their way to the watering hole, and a gentle breeze danced across the plains. Near a rocky hill known as Pride Rock, a family of lions was waking up for the day. Among them was a young lion cub named Leo. Leo was kind-hearted, curious, and full of imagination. He loved chasing butterflies, exploring hidden paths through the grass, and listening to stories from the older lions. But more than anything, Leo dreamed of growing up to be strong and brave, like the adult lions in his pride. Every young lion had an important skill to learn as they grew: their roar. A lion's roar could travel for miles across the savanna. It helped lions communicate, protect their families, and show confidence when facing challenges. The older cubs were already learning to roar louder every day. And now, it was Leo's turn to practice too. Little did he know, this simple lesson would soon become the greatest challenge of his young life. That afternoon, the lion cubs gathered beneath a large acacia tree, where the warm sunlight filtered through the branches and created dancing patterns on the ground. The cubs sat in a circle, while the older lions watched proudly. "Today," said Papa, High Lion with a smile, "we will practice our roars. Remember, every great lion starts with a small roar." The cubs nodded eagerly. One by one, they stepped forward. A cub named Quito puffed out his chest, took a deep breath, and let out a loud roar. "Roar!" The sound echoed across the grasslands. The other cubs cheered. Next came Zara. She stood tall, raised her head, and released an even stronger roar. Roar! Birds fluttered from a nearby tree. Everyone clapped their paws. Then Papa Lion smiled at Leo. "Your turn, Leo." Immediately, Leo felt a flutter in his stomach. He slowly stepped into the center of the circle. All eyes were on him. "I can do this," he thought. Leo planted his paws firmly on the ground. He lifted his head. He took the biggest breath he could manage. The other cubs waited. Papa Lion waited. Even the wind seemed to stop. Leo opened his mouth and squeak! A tiny sound slipped out. The cubs blinked. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then a few cubs giggled. A couple of them tried not to laugh, but they couldn't help it. Soon, several cubs were chuckling. Leo felt his ears droop. His face grew hot with embarrassment. He stared at the ground and wished he could disappear into the tall grass. "It's okay," Mama Lion said gently. "Learning takes time." But Leo barely heard her. All he could think about was the laughter. The next day, the cubs practiced again. Leo tried once more. He took a deep breath. He concentrated as hard as he could and squeak! Still no roar. A few cubs exchanged glances. Leo's heart sank. Day after day, the same thing happened. The other cubs improved. Their roars became stronger. Their confidence grew. But Leo's roar remained trapped somewhere deep inside him. Before long, Leo began making excuses whenever it was time to practice. Sometimes he pretended to be busy. Sometimes he wandered off alone. Sometimes he simply hid among the tall grasses until practice was over. At first, nobody noticed, but Mama Lion did. One evening, as the sun began to set and painted the sky with beautiful shades of orange and pink, she found Leo sitting quietly on a small hill overlooking the savannah. "You've been spending a lot of time alone lately," she said softly. Leo sighed. "I'll never roar like the others." Mama Lion sat beside him. "Why do you think that?" "Because I've tried and tried and tried," Leo replied. "Everyone else can do it. Maybe I'm just different." Mama Lion gently wrapped her tail around him. "Leo, every animal learns at a different pace. The strongest lions are not always the ones who learn first." But Leo wasn't convinced. As darkness settled over the savannah, he looked toward the distant horizon and wondered if he would ever find the courage to keep trying. Little did he know, someone very wise was about to enter his life. Someone who would teach him a lesson he would never forget. The next morning, Leo woke up before the rest of the pride. The sky was painted with soft shades of pink and gold as the sun slowly climbed above the horizon. Feeling discouraged, Leo decided to go for a walk. He wandered through the tall grasses, past the watering hole, and beyond the familiar paths he usually explored. The farther he walked, the quieter the savannah became. Eventually, he reached a peaceful clearing where an enormous baobab tree stood proudly in the center. Its thick trunk looked as though it had been watching over the land for hundreds of years. Leo sat beneath the tree and sighed. "What's the point of trying?" he muttered. "I've been asking myself that question for many years." Leo jumped in surprise. "Who said that?" A gentle chuckle came from nearby. Slowly making his way through the grass was the oldest tortoise Leo had ever seen. His shell was worn and weathered, and his wise eyes sparkled with kindness. The tortoise moved very slowly, but there was something calm and confident about him. "My name is Temba," said the tortoise, "and judging by the look on your face, something is troubling you." Leo hesitated. Then for some reason he felt comfortable talking to the old tortoise. So he told him everything. He explained how the other cubs could roar, how they laughed when he squeaked, how embarrassed he felt, and how he was beginning to believe he would never learn. When Leo finished, Temba nodded thoughtfully. "I see. You do?" asked Leo. "Of course," said Temba. Leo looked confused. "But you've never tried to roar," Temba smiled. "No, but I have faced fears of my own." The young lion tilted his head. What could a tortoise possibly be afraid of? Temba laughed warmly. "When I was young, I was afraid of crossing rivers." Leo blinked. "Rivers?" "Very much so," replied Temba. "The current looked strong, and I worried I would be swept away." "What happened?" "For years, I avoided every river I saw." Leo listened carefully. Then one day, I realized something important. "What was it?" Leo asked. Temba's eyes twinkled. "Fear grows larger when you run away from it." Leo thought about that. The tortoise continued. "The more I avoided rivers, the scarier they seemed. But when I finally gathered the courage to cross one, I discovered something surprising." "What?" "I was stronger than my fear." Leo was silent. The words settled gently into his mind. Temba moved closer. "Tell me, Leo, what happens when it's time to practice roaring?" "I get scared. And then I worry everyone will laugh. And then I don't want to try." The tortoise nodded. "You see, your fear is not stopping you because you cannot roar." Leo frowned. "What do you mean?" "It is stopping you because you have started believing that failing is worse than trying." Leo had never thought about it that way before. Temba looked toward the horizon. "Do you know how an acacia tree becomes tall?" Leo shook his head. "One day at a time." The tortoise pointed to the giant baobab tree. "And do you know how a mighty tree begins? No. As a tiny seed, Leo stared at the massive tree. It was hard to imagine something so enormous starting so small. Then Temba smiled and said something Leo would remember forever. Every mighty roar begins as a tiny sound. The young lion repeated the words quietly. Every mighty roar begins as a tiny sound. Temba nodded. Exactly. You do not need a perfect roar today. You only need the courage to make the next sound. For the first time in many days, Leo felt a small spark of hope. Maybe he wasn't failing. Maybe he was simply learning. As the morning sun warmed the clearing, Leo thanked the wise tortoise and began walking home. His roar still wasn't strong. His fear hadn't disappeared, but something inside him had changed, and that change would soon lead him on an important journey. The very next day, Leo woke up feeling different. The fear was still there, but so were Temba's words. Every mighty roar begins as a tiny sound. As the morning sun spread across the savannah, Leo stood on a small hill and took a deep breath. Okay, he said to himself, just one try. He planted his paws firmly on the ground. He lifted his head high. He filled his lungs with air, and then, squeak! The sound was tiny, not a roar, not even close. For a moment, Leo felt disappointed. Then he remembered Temba's advice. You only need the courage to make the next sound. So instead of giving up, Leo smiled. Tomorrow, I'll try again. The next day, he returned to the hill. This time, he practiced twice. His first attempt sounded like a squeak. His second attempt sounded a little stronger. Squee-rock, Leo blinked. That sounded different. It wasn't much, but it was progress, and progress made him excited. Over the next few weeks, Leo turned practice into a daily adventure. Each morning, he explored a different part of the savannah while working on his roar. One day, he practiced near the watering hole. There, he met a young elephant named Nia. Nia watched curiously as Leo attempted another roar. Squee-roar! The elephant flapped her ears happily. That sounded stronger than yesterday. Leo smiled. You think so? Definitely, said Nia. When I was little, I couldn't spray water with my trunk. I accidentally sprayed myself instead. Leo laughed. Really? Oh yes, Nia giggled. Learning takes practice. The encouragement made Leo feel proud. Another day, Leo practiced near a group of playful meerkats. They were busy digging tunnels when they heard him. Roar! Squeak! The meerkats popped their heads out of the ground. One of them cheered. That sounded much more lion-like. Leo grinned. Even though the roar wasn't perfect, it was getting stronger, little by little, day by day. Soon, Leo noticed something surprising. He was beginning to enjoy practicing. Instead of worrying about making mistakes, he started focusing on improving. Every attempt taught him something new. Every small success made him want to keep going, and every challenge became a chance to grow. One afternoon, Leo returned to the baobab tree to visit Temba. The old tortoise was resting in the shade when Leo arrived. I've been practicing every day, Leo said proudly. Temba smiled. I can tell. You can? Your eyes are brighter. Leo thought about that. The tortoise continued. True confidence doesn't appear all at once. It grows each time you face something difficult. Leo nodded. I still get nervous. That's normal, said Temba. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's not? No. The tortoise looked kindly at the young lion. Courage is choosing to move forward even when fear is walking beside you. Leo thought about those words carefully. They made him feel stronger somehow. As the days passed, Leo's roar continued to improve. The squeaks became growls. The growls became small roars. And one evening, while practicing on a rocky cliff overlooking the savannah, something amazing happened. Leo took a deep breath. He focused. He believed in himself. And then The sound wasn't huge. It wasn't powerful enough to shake the earth, but it was a real roar, a genuine lion's roar. Leo's eyes widened. He had done it. Birds fluttered into the sky. A nearby herd of antelope looked up in surprise, and somewhere in the distance, Temba smiled knowingly. Leo raced home with excitement bubbling inside him. For the first time, he truly believed that one day he might have a mighty roar after all. But neither Leo nor the other animals knew that a much greater challenge was approaching. Far beyond the horizon, dark clouds were beginning to gather, and soon the savannah would face a storm unlike any it had seen in years. As the sun disappeared behind the distant hills, the sky slowly began to change. The bright oranges and golds of sunset faded into deep shades of gray. Far across the horizon, dark clouds gathered like giant mountains in the sky. The wind that had once felt warm and gentle now blew across the savannah in powerful gusts. The tall grasses swayed back and forth. The acacia trees creaked and groaned, and the animals began to notice that something unusual was happening. The next morning, the air felt heavy. Birds flew lower than usual. Even the insects seemed quieter. Mama Lion gazed at the sky with concern. "A storm is coming," she said. The older lions nodded. Storms were a part of life in the savannah. But this one felt different. Much bigger, much stronger. By afternoon, the clouds had covered the sun completely. A deep rumble echoed across the plains. Boom! Leo looked up. A flash of lightning streaked across the sky. For a moment, the entire savannah glowed bright white. Then came another thunderclap. Crack! The younger animals huddled close to their families. Even Leo felt nervous. He had never seen a storm this powerful before. As the first drops of rain began to fall, the animals hurried to find shelter. Elephants moved toward the rocky hills. Zebras gathered together. The lions guided their cubs toward safer ground. Soon the rain became heavier and heavier and heavier until sheets of water poured from the sky. The wind howled. The trees bent. The grass flattened beneath the storm. Leo stayed close to his family as they sheltered among the rocks. But all around them, the storm grew fiercer. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flashed again and again. The noise was so loud that it drowned out almost every other sound. Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of slowing down. Then suddenly a frightened cry pierced through the rain. "Help!" Leo's ears perked up. He looked around. Had he imagined it? Then he heard it again, a small voice, scared and alone. "Help! Somebody help me!" Leo's heart skipped a beat. The voice was coming from somewhere beyond the rocky shelter. He carefully stepped toward the edge and peered through the curtain of rain. At first he saw nothing. Then another flash of lightning illuminated the grasslands. And there, far from the safety of the pride, was a tiny lion cub. The cub was alone, separated from its family, lost in the storm. The little cub called out again, but the wind carried the sound away. No one else seemed to hear. The adults were busy protecting the younger animals. The thunder drowned out every cry for help. Leo looked around desperately. Someone needed to help. Someone needed to guide the lost cub back to safety. But how? The rain was too loud. The wind was too strong. And the frightened cub was too far away. As Leo watched the tiny figure struggling through the storm, a realization slowly began to form in his mind. There might be only one way to help, one way to reach the adults, one way to guide the lost cub home. But it would require something Leo still wasn't completely sure he could do. A roar, not a small roar, not a practice roar, a real roar, the biggest roar of his life. Leo swallowed nervously. His heart pounded. The storm raged around him, and suddenly all eyes would soon be on him once again. Leo stood at the edge of the rocky shelter, staring into the storm. Rain poured from the sky. Thunder shook the ground. The lost cub was still out there, alone, scared, and getting farther away. With every passing moment, Leo's heart pounded in his chest. He knew what he had to do, but he was terrified. What if I try and fail, he thought. What if all that comes out is a squeak? The old fear he had carried for so long suddenly returned. The fear of being laughed at, the fear of making mistakes, the fear of not being good enough. For a moment, Leo took a step backward. Maybe one of the adult lions would notice. Maybe someone else would help. Maybe he didn't have to do it. But then another flash of lightning illuminated the grasslands, and Leo saw the lost cub stumble and fall. The tiny lion looked frightened, cold, and completely alone. Leo's ears drooped. He remembered how it felt to feel helpless, how it felt when nobody believed in you, how it felt when fear seemed bigger than you were. And in that moment, Leo made a decision. No, he whispered. I'm not running away this time. The words surprised even him. The fear was still there, but something else was there too. Courage, small at first, but growing stronger. Leo closed his eyes for a moment, and suddenly he remembered Temba. He could almost hear the wise tortoise speaking. Fear grows larger when you run away from it. Then another memory came. You only need the courage to make the next sound. And finally the words that had changed everything. Every mighty roar begins as a tiny sound. Leo opened his eyes. The storm no longer seemed quite as frightening, because he understood something now. He didn't need to be fearless. He only needed to be brave enough to try. The young lion climbed onto the highest rock he could find. The wind pushed against him. The rain soaked his fur. Thunder crashed overhead, but Leo stood tall, taller than he had ever stood before. The adults began to notice him. Mama Lion looked up. "Leo," she called. But Leo kept his eyes fixed on the lost cub. This wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about helping someone who needed him. Leo planted his paws firmly on the rock. He took one deep breath, then another, and another. He could feel his heart racing. He could feel fear whispering in his ear. But this time, he didn't listen. Instead, he listened to the courage growing inside him. The lost cub cried out again. The storm answered with thunder. Time was running out. Leo drew the deepest breath he had ever taken in his life. Every lesson, every practice, every mistake, every small success, everything had led to this moment. He lifted his head toward the stormy sky, opened his mouth, and prepared to unleash the roar hidden inside him all along. Leo opened his mouth and released every bit of courage he had inside him. The sound exploded across the savannah. It rolled over the grasslands like a mighty wave. It echoed from the rocky hills. It soared through the rain and thunder. For a moment, even the storm seemed to pause. The animals looked up in surprise. The zebras heard it, the elephants heard it, the birds heard it, and most importantly, the lost cub heard it. The frightened little lion lifted its head. Its eyes widened. It recognized the sound, a lion's roar, a signal of safety, a guide leading the way home. Leo roared again, even louder this time. Roar. The roar cut through the wind and rain. The adults immediately understood. "There!" shouted Papa Lion. "A cub is lost!" Without hesitation, the lions sprang into action. They followed the direction of Leo's roar through the storm. Within minutes, they found the frightened cub and carefully guided it back to safety. As the little cub reunited with its family, relief spread across the savannah. The danger had passed. The cub was safe. And it was all because one young lion had found the courage to use his voice when it mattered most. The rain began to slow. The thunder drifted into the distance, and slowly the storm clouds started to part. Golden rays of sunlight broke through the sky, shining across the wet grasslands. The storm was over, but Leo's journey was only just reaching its most important moment. As the last storm clouds drifted away, the savannah sparkled beneath the warm afternoon sun. Drops of rain glistened on the grass like tiny diamonds, animals began emerging from their shelters. Before long, a crowd gathered near the rocky hill where Leo stood. The young lion looked around nervously. For a moment, he wondered if everyone was staring at him. Then something unexpected happened. They began to cheer. The zebras stomped their hooves. The elephants raised their trunks. The birds sang from the trees. Even the playful meerkats popped out of their tunnels and applauded. Leo saved the cub. He led us through the storm. What a roar! The young lion couldn't believe his ears. The lost cub's family stepped forward. The little cub smiled. Thank you, Leo. If it wasn't for your roar, I don't know what would have happened. Leo felt a warm glow inside his chest. It wasn't pride. It wasn't excitement. It was something even better. Confidence. For the very first time, he truly believed in himself. Mama Lion wrapped him in a loving hug. I've always known you had courage inside you, she said. Papa Lion smiled proudly. And today, you showed everyone else. Leo looked down shyly. But I was scared. The adults exchanged knowing smiles. Then a familiar voice spoke from behind the crowd. And yet, you did it anyway. Leo turned and saw Temba the tortoise slowly approaching. The old tortoise's eyes twinkled with pride. You were afraid, Temba continued, but you chose to help someone who needed you. That is what real courage looks like. Leo thought about everything that had happened, the squeaks, the mistakes, the practice, the fear, the storm, and finally the roar. Suddenly he understood. His greatest obstacle had never been his voice. It had been believing he couldn't succeed. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Leo stood on a hill overlooking the savannah. The wind gently rustled through his fur. The animals below went about their day peacefully once more. Leo smiled. Then he took a deep breath, lifted his head, and let out a strong, confident roar. The sound echoed across the grasslands, not because Leo was fearless, but because he had learned something much more important. Being brave doesn't mean you're never afraid. Being brave means doing the right thing, even when you are. And from that day forward, whenever young animals felt nervous, scared, or unsure of themselves, they remembered the story of the little lion who was afraid to roar. Because sometimes the smallest step of courage can create the biggest change of all. The end. Did you enjoy Leo's adventure? What would you have done if you were Leo during the storm? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more magical stories here on Fizzle Tales TV. Until next time, keep learning, keep dreaming, and keep being brave.